Welcome, dear soul, to a journey through time and tenderness. Tonight, we drift softly through a world long faded, yet whispering still through stone and scroll, through faded tapestries and quiet lore. A time when beauty was not merely seen, but sensed, sung and symbolized. A quiet reflection of status, spirit, and sacred design. Let the hush of history cradle you as we begin our moonlit journey into the essence of medieval beauty. Close your eyes, if you wish, and picture the cool stone of a castle wall, the flicker of a beeswax candle, the rustle of linen and velvet as a lady prepares for the day. Hear the distant sound of a bell, calling matins to begin. Beauty in this age was not simply adornment. It was devotion, ritual, and inheritance. It was painted gently upon the body, like prayer upon a page. If you genuinely like my content, hit that like button and subscribe. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what you think about this topic. It's really awesome to see how far and wide our audience in this channel. So breathe deeply. Let your thoughts drift like dust in candlelight. And let us wander now, softly, into the world of medieval beauty. The light in medieval chambers was tender and shy. Filtered through stained glass, it painted the stone floors with halos of ruby and sapphire. Within these quiet cloisters of nobility, the highest ideal of beauty was pale, untouched skin, glowing faintly like the belly of a pearl. This fairness was more than aesthetic. It whispered of luxury, of bloodlines unmarked by toil. It spoke of shelter from sun and sweat, of lineage kept pure and refined. Pale skin, cool as moonlight on alabaster, became a canvas on which class, virtue, and sacred restraint were softly brushed. To achieve this ideal, noble women engaged in their own gentle alchemy. They would grind lily roots and mix the powder with milk, creating a balm that cooled and lightened. Some whispered recipes called for chalk and lead, delicate and dangerous, yet accepted as the price of grace. Others preferred the soothing touch of oatmeal soaked in rose water, or the pressing of white clay from sacred earths. The ritual was slow. Each stroke of powder upon the cheek was a hymn to stillness. Mirrors were rare and dim, but reflections were seen in bowls of water or the gleam of polished metal. Women would sit in quiet circles, combing each other's hair, dabbing their faces, murmuring secrets as soft as moth wings. The sunlight was shunned. Wide-brimmed hoods, gauzy veils, and lattice screens protected the precious pallor. In gardens, they strolled at twilight, under long shadows, so that the day would never mar what nature and care had preserved. Pale skin was not only lovely, it was moral, spiritual, chaste. It echoed the purity of the Virgin Mary in illuminated manuscripts, whose delicate visage glowed faintly under halos of gold leaf. It was the complexion of angels, of saints, of untouchable virtue. Even the breath was held differently when painting the face. Slow, sacred, careful not to stir the powders into cloud. A beauty, so still, so carefully shaped, seemed almost to float outside time, suspended in eternal prayer. And so the women of the high courts, of abbeys, of manor halls, became living relics of a spiritual ideal, wearing their pallor not as vanity, but as symbol, a hush upon the flesh that whispered of heaven. Hair, in the medieval imagination, was not merely an adornment. It was a mantle of mystery, a river of light that flowed from the head and carried with it meanings as rich and layered as the braids it often wore. To gaze upon a woman's hair was to glimpse something sacred, perhaps even dangerous, for within those tresses lived tales of sanctity, seduction, and ancestral pride. The ideal hair in many noble courts was golden, blonde like ripe wheat under midsummer skies. Fair hair shimmered with associations of innocence, purity, even divinity, echoing the golden halos of saints painted in chapel apse. Women of darker strands sought out ancient recipes to coax their hair toward this radiance, washing with saffron steeped in rainwater, rinsing in chamomile, or sunning their locks gently beneath gauze to avoid darkening the skin. There were more curious methods too, rubbing in a mixture of ash and vinegar, or even urine aged in jars, believed to lighten and refine. The rituals were whispered woman to woman, mother to daughter, like spells passed down through hushed generations. Hair length held its own reverence. Long hair symbolized fertility, patience, virtue. To let it cascade freely was a sign of maidenhood or deep trust. But most days it was hidden, tamed in intricate plaits, tucked beneath linen wimples or coiled beneath crespines of silk and wire. And yet, even hidden, hair had power. It was scented with lavender or crushed rosemary. It was brushed by candlelight, and it was guarded like a holy relic. For brides, hair was unbound, a rare and gentle sight. On wedding mornings, mothers and sisters would comb the hair, murmuring soft prayers, preparing it, like one prepares the altar for sacred rites. Even in death, some women were buried with their hair unbraided, a return to innocence, to divine embrace. Men, too, held ideals for hair. Shorter, perhaps, but curled and carefully scented. Knights wore locks beneath their helms, letting strands fall like poetry across their armor. Monks, of course, bore the tonsure, a circle of bare skin like a moon on the crown, signifying humility and divine focus. In all its shades and shapes, hair in the medieval world was both veil and vision, a signifier of the seen and the unseen, the earthly and the ethereal. It framed the face as ivy frames a chapel door, leading the eye toward mystery, memory, and quiet reverence. In the hush of the candlelit chamber, where embroidery needles clicked softly like tiny bells, there was an unspoken reverence for the high, expansive forehead. To the medieval eye, this expanse of skin was not barren. It was a sign of wisdom, nobility, and gentle discipline. The more the brow arched skyward, the more refined the woman was thought to be. And so the hairline was raised, slowly, deliberately. Women plucked the hairs at their temples and the crown, inch by inch, using tweezers of bone or bronze. Others mixed lime with vinegar, a pungent paste that bit into the skin, stinging with sacred purpose, revealing smoothness beneath. It was not seen as pain, but as devotion, each tug a quiet offering to beauty. Eyebrows, too, were thinned into faint threads or plucked away entirely, leaving only a shadow of suggestion. In portraits of queens and duchesses, the faces are long and luminous, the eyes wide beneath bare brows, as though always in prayer or pondering grace. In courtly poems, the forehead was praised in verses, likened to moonlit parchment, to quiet lakes untouched by ripple. It was the canvas of thought, the garden of virtue, where no unruly strand was allowed to grow wild. The noblewoman's gaze seemed to drift higher, her beauty lifted skyward with her brow. Young girls learned early the art of refinement, At the age when other children might chase shadows or collect feathers, they were taught to sit still, to gaze into the water's mirror, to endure the plucking with grace. There was pride in restraint, in the silence of submission to elegance. The aesthetic was not about excess, but about absence, the deliberate removal of what was natural in favor of what was revered, a kind of spiritual editing. The forehead became a sacred space, a bright clearing in the forest of the face, where nothing uninvited grew. In this quiet transformation, the face became a reliquary of purity, and the women, shaped by tender rituals and whispered traditions, became icons in flesh, each browless glance a lullaby of noble stillness. In the hush of the medieval morning, when dew still clung to the ivy and the sun painted the clouds in soft gold, women turned to the mirror, or what served as one, and sought the quiet bloom of life in their cheeks and lips. Not bold, never brash, just a breath of warmth, a whisper of color. It began with simple things. The petal of a rose, crushed between fingers and dabbed gently on the cheek. The root of madder steeped in wine, producing a soft stain. Brazil wood, steeped in rosewater, became a sacred tincture. A liquid kiss of pink to tint the lips and wake the face. To glow, but gently, that was the art. The cheek should hold the hue of a child's laughter, or a modest heart caught in love's quiet prayer. Too much, and it whispered vanity. Too little, and it might echo illness. Balance was everything. Lips, too, were cherished, but rarely spoken of. Their color enhanced just enough to suggest vitality. Red was softened to rose. Burgundy diluted into berry water. The preparation was intimate. A mirror of water in a silver bowl. A cloth. A whispered blessing. In monasteries and quiet cloisters, some women rejected such tints, believing them distractions from divine contemplation. But in courts and among the landed, a woman's rosy glow spoke of health, of marriageability, of grace. Beneath all this, always, was the white powder. A veil of flour or crushed pearl, sometimes of more dangerous lead. Upon this canvas, color could whisper instead of shout. It was like adding wildflowers to snow, subtle, poetic, fleeting. The rouge was applied with fingers, warmed by the skin, or with tiny pads of wool. It was shared between sisters, borrowed from mothers, and passed on like a secret recipe for inner warmth. Some mixed herbs and honey, others in goose fat, or wine left in the moonlight. And in the end, as the candles burned low, it was the inner fire, a woman's kindness, poise, grace that truly animated the color. For the medieval world believed beauty began not in the face, but in the heart. A rosy cheek, a painted lip. They were but echoes of that gentle light within. In every illuminated manuscript, in every stained glass saint, the eyes glimmer with a kind of stillness, deep, endless, and holy. To the medieval mind, beauty rested not just in the face, but in the gaze. The eyes were not simply windows to the soul. They were pools of spirit, reflecting a person's virtue, calm, and inner light. Large eyes were most prized, gentle, bright, and rounded, like orbs of polished riverstone. They suggested innocence and openness, a quiet readiness to see the world with grace. In song and scripture alike, the beloved's eyes were compared to doves, to stars, to lakes at dusk, calm and knowing. Women adorned their eyes softly. They lined them in some regions with soot or powdered antimony, drawn carefully along the lash line to deepen the gaze. This wasn't the bold eye of later ages, but a shadow, a softness like twilight along the horizon. Some used chamomile tea to soothe the eyes, or tinctures of fennel to brighten them. Believing a clear eye reflected a clean soul. Iris color, too, bore meaning. Pale blue was likened to purity, brown to warmth and truth. Green, rare and haunting, hinted at mystery. But above all, it was the expression that mattered. Downcast, modest, attentive. A gaze that lingered on prayer books and not on pride. Eyes were also vessels of courtly love. A glance exchanged across the great hall, a stolen moment beneath the canopy of a May feast. These were acts of silent poetry. Lovers composed entire verses to the memory of a gaze held only once, cherished like a relic. Eyes became metaphors in love songs, wrapped in riddles and sighs, bound by longing. For men, too, the eyes carried weight. Knights bore gazes that were proud, but gentle. Their eyes revealed strength in restraint, courage without cruelty. The troubadour's gaze was distant, dreamy, full of longing and song. Monks and scholars often spoke little but carried a quiet, luminous watchfulness, as though they saw beyond what lay before them. Eyes were believed to hold power, benevolent or dangerous. The evil eye, feared across many lands, was thought to wound with envy or wrath. Charms and amulets were worn to deflect it, while the gaze of a saint was believed to heal, to comfort, to sanctify. Mothers made signs over their infants, whispering prayers that would shield the child from wayward stares. The medieval world saw vision as more than sight. It was communion. To look was to touch the soul. To be looked upon with love or reverence was to be blessed. And so the eyes, above all features, were the most sacred, the most haunting, the most human. In this way, a woman's beauty was not merely in how she appeared, but in how she beheld. Her gaze could soothe, invite, forgive. It could carry sorrow or summon delight. The medieval eye was a candle in the chapel of the face, glowing, steady, deep. And in the dim corridors of stone halls, a single glance could be a prayer, a promise, or a poem waiting to be sung. In the quiet hush of the hall, where tapestries swayed like sleeping trees and rushes crunched gently beneath velvet slippers, there walked a silhouette shaped by ideals older than time. The body, so softly celebrated, so gently adorned, was not a thing to be flaunted, but to be draped, sculpted, suggested. Medieval beauty did not dwell in stark nudity or brazen form. It blossomed beneath layers. It curved under linen, whispered through wool, peeked beneath the folds of silk. The ideal woman's figure was slender, almost willowy, with narrow shoulders that sloped like ivy on stone, and a torso that led the eye gently toward a softly rounded stomach, a symbol not of gluttony, but of fertility, of the divine feminine abundance. This gentle protrusion, so unlike modern ideals, echoed ancient reverence for the womb. It was neither hidden nor accentuated, but simply welcomed, a quiet center of life. Hips were narrow, and limbs long and delicate. Hands, pale and tapered, were admired as markers of gentility, their palms smooth and unscarred, untouched by labor. Clothing played its part in shaping this silhouette. The bliot, that gown of flowing grace, hugged the upper body before cascading into rippling pleats. Cinched at the waist with a girdle or belt, it guided the form into modest elegance. Later came the sideless surcoat, worn over tight-fitting undergowns, revealing the body's outline while maintaining its mystery. The chest was lifted but modest, corsetry was not yet the cruel architecture it would become. Instead, shaping came through lacing, clever seams, and fabric weight. The result was a silhouette like the bell towers, strong yet subtle, reaching heavenward, while rooted in softness. Pregnancy was not hidden as shameful, but adorned. Expectant women wore gowns tailored to expand. Fertility was divine, motherhood sacred. In some portraits, the Virgin's belly was shown prominently, a radiant orb wrapped in velvet and prayer. Even posture told stories of beauty. To stoop, to swagger, these were unbecoming. Instead, one stood as though suspended by grace, head gently bowed, arms close to the body. Movements were slow, measured, like verses spoken in the nave. Men, too, had their shapes. Broad shoulders, narrow hips, strong calves shone through tight hose. Tunics and tabards carved their forms in fabric. Strength was seen in proportion, in balance. Not in bulk, but in composure. The body, clothed or unclothed, was not simply flesh. It was theology, art, poetry, draped in faith and fantasy, shaped by both seam and spirit. The medieval form walked slowly through its world, not to be seen, but to be beheld. And it was not just what was worn, but how it moved, how it breathed. A woman might kneel at vespers, her gown pooling like water, her presence as silent and serene as the carved saints above. A man might bow with care, his tunic rustling softly, his every gesture measured, imbued with dignity. These were not bodies of labor and pace, but of pageantry and presence. In tapestries, the body was framed by florals and forests, depicted in harmonious rhythm with nature. In stained glass, the holy and the human mingled, saints with soft curves, angels with gentle folds of drapery. All suggested that divinity lived not apart from the body, but through its grace and bearing. In this world of candlelight and contemplation, the shape of beauty lay not in dominance or defiance, but in harmony. It moved like wind through lace curtains, like prayers down stone corridors. And it left bin, the candlelit silence of monastic halls. Beauty was both venerated and questioned. It drifted like incense, divine, yet dangerous, revered, yet restrained. The medieval world saw the body as both temple and temptation, and thus, beauty held a sacred ambivalence, forever poised between heaven and earth. The Church taught that beauty, like all gifts, came from God. To see beauty was to glimpse the divine handiwork, a reminder of paradise, a spark of grace, a fair face, a well-proportioned figure, a gentle gaze. These could inspire holiness, echoing the harmony of angels and the sacred order of creation. Yet this same beauty could mislead, provoke, distract. It could lure the soul from its holy path, stir lust where there should be prayer. Church fathers, from Augustine to Jerome, warned against vanity, advising women to cloak themselves not only in fabric, but in humility. Adornment was watched with wary eyes. To paint the face, to pluck the brow, to scent the hair. These were acts that, in excess, might signal pride. Some sermons likened cosmetics to lies, the painted woman to a siren tempting saints. Even mirrors were discouraged, seen as portals to self-idolatry. And yet, beauty could not be banished. It bloomed in illuminated manuscripts, in frescoes of the Virgin crowned in stars, in stained glass windows where saints bore rosy cheeks and luminous skin. It echoed through hymns and processions, cloaked in incense and lace. The Virgin Mary became the ultimate model of sacred beauty, pure, gentle, serene. Her image shaped ideals across Christendom. Downcast eyes, pale skin, covered hair, soft curves wrapped in flowing blue. To emulate Mary was to sanctify the flesh. But beauty's suspicion extended beyond the feminine. Young monks wrestled with their reflections in still water. Knights questioned their own gleaming armor, wondering whether they polished it for God or glory. In this tension, beauty became a crucible, a test of the soul's intentions. Relics and saints' bodies were adorned with jewels and silks, their bones laid in gold. Here, beauty became reverence. To dress the sacred was to praise the divine within it, and so the line blurred between holy and human, between modesty and majesty. In the medieval world, beauty walked a narrow path, one foot in the cloister, the other in the court. It was a gift to be tended, a danger to be watched, a blessing and a burden. And in every chapel, every boudoir, every marketplace it whispered, "Not all that is lovely is safe, and not all that is sacred is plain." Beyond the courts and cloisters, beyond the stone keeps and velvet tapestries, beauty wore another face. It was sun-kissed, wind-etched, fragrant with earth and bread and rosemary. In the fields and cottages of the medieval countryside, ideals of loveliness grew, not from sermons or scrolls, but from seasons and soil, from hearths and harvest. Here, a woman's hands told stories, not of stillness, but of strength. They kneaded dough, gathered herbs, cradled children. Their skin bore freckles from sun, calluses from tools, warmth from firelight. And yet they were admired, not for softness, but for sincerity, for the way they moved with rhythm and purpose. Skin darkened gently beneath summer skies, flushed with health, warmed by labor. While noble ideals prized pallor, the village gaze saw beauty in vitality. Cheeks brushed with wind, hair tousled by hay, eyes bright with dawn's dew and dusk's firelight. These were the signs of a life fully lived. Clothing was simple, layered in linen and wool, worn with ease and adjusted for the day's work. Aprons tied at the waist, headscarves bound the hair. And still, on feast days, beauty blossomed. Ribbons found their way into braids, berries tinted lips, and even the roughest hands held flowers with tenderness. In song and story, the shepherdess was often the muse, sweet, spirited, golden with youth and unpolished charm. Her beauty was not constructed, but revealed in laughter, in gesture, in the honest poise of a back bent to garden and grain. Men, too, were seen through the lens of labor, broad shoulders from lifting, arms firm from scything fields, faces roughened by wind, but softened by smile. Their beauty came not from polish, but from harmony with the land, gait in tune with the oxen, breath aligned with the rising sun. Elders bore their own quiet dignity. Wrinkles marked years of kindness and care. Eyes held stories, hands cradled wisdom. Beauty here was generational, a legacy woven not of lace, but of loaves and lullabies. And in festivals, the maypole dances, the harvest feasts, everyone was radiant. Wreaths of wildflowers crowned heads, laughter painted faces. The glow of communal joy made even the plainest gown shimmer. Rural beauty was not always spoken, but it was known. It drifted through the smoke of baking bread, nestled in straw beds, wandered under apple boughs in bloom. It did not ask to be seen. It simply was. Far from the manor hearths and cathedral echoes, beauty blossomed in other lands, under other suns, shaped by different prayers and customs. In the silken courts of the Islamic world, in the gold-leafed sanctuaries of Byzantium, in the snowy hush of Nordic halls. There, too, ideals shimmered, distinct and divine. In the Islamic courts, beauty was scented and shaded, veiled in grace. Eyes, cold and delicate charcoal, carried entire poems in a single glance. Skin was perfumed with attar of rose, musk, and ambergris. Hair, often concealed, was nonetheless oiled with myrrh and braided with care. Beauty was not displayed, but suggested, like the fragrance of jasmine through a lattice window. The Quran sang of gardens and rivers, but also of the grace of the faithful, whose loveliness was tied to humility and light. Clothing in Islamic lands flowed like poetry. Loose robes of gauze, wool, or silk, dyed with saffron and indigo, decorated with script like falling stars. Jewelry sparkled beneath veils, rings and bangles that chimed with movement, that whispered heritage and delicacy. Byzantine beauty glowed from within mosaics and icons. Faces were stylized, long, serene, radiant with inner fire. Women adorned themselves in pearls, not just for wealth, but for their soft glow, their purity. Complexions were luminous, as if reflecting the celestial. Gowns shimmered in deep purples and blues, embroidered with golden thread. Here, beauty mirrored heaven, shaped by orthodoxy, devotion, and imperial elegance. Even the architecture echoed beauty's ideals: curved domes, gilded chapels, spaces where incense lingered in golden light. Beauty was orderly, measured, divine geometry rendered in flesh and cloth. A woman's glance could mirror a saint's, her posture that of an empress or martyr. In the far north, where the nights were long and the light was clean and cold, Nordic beauty was sculpted by snow and sea. Hair was fair, braided or left loose to catch the wind. Faces bore the kiss of frost, cheeks pink with life, eyes pale as ice lake mirrors. Jewelry was wrought from silver and amber, simple yet powerful. In sagas, beauty was strength, a woman who walked the fjords with a blade at her belt, or a man whose broad frame stood like stone against storm. Saunas and seawater, pine resin and salted air shaped the body and spirit. Beauty was not a performance. It was a survival, a harmony with the fjord and forest, the stars above and sea beneath. The natural world was not backdrop, but muse. Each culture cradled its own form of loveliness, woven with its spiritual beliefs, its climate, its rhythms. And yet, across these landscapes, desert and forest, minaret and fjord, the core remained beauty as a reflection of inner harmony, of belonging, of story. To see beauty in these worlds was to hear it as well, in the prayer call at dawn, the chant of monks, the lullaby of waves against a longship. It moved through gesture, through silence, through the brush of silk and the gleam of snow. Thus, the medieval world was not one single mirror, but a mosaic, each tile a different shade, a different shape, bound together in sacred design. Time moves forward like a stream beneath moonlight, silent, steady, ever-changing. Yet beauty, like the scent of lavender on linen, or the echo of a prayer sung in stone halls, lingers long after the world is turned. The ideals of medieval beauty did not fade with the fall of towers or the silence of courtly love songs. They transformed. They filtered into Renaissance palettes, Victorian modesty, and even the glassy gaze of our modern world. The high foreheads gave way to powdered wigs, the pale skin to porcelain cosmetics, yet the yearning to embody grace virtue, and meaning has remained. Today, we still seek symmetry, softness, depth in the eyes. We still veil, adorn, cleanse. We still whisper to mirrors, wondering not only how we appear, but what we convey of status, spirit, story. And just as the noblewoman once powdered her face in morning light, so too do we shape our reflection in the glow of screens. Yet there is a quiet call now, a return to the deeper rhythms. We look not just to display, but to feel, to find beauty, not only in perfection, but in peace, in freckles, in texture, in the wrinkles that speak of laughter and time. We return to the earth, to herbs and oils, to slow rituals and simplicity. Medieval beauty, with all its veils and virtues, reminds us of something essential, that how we present ourselves is not separate from how we see the world. That beauty is not only a surface, it is a gesture, a quiet code of belonging, a light held gently in the hands. And so, as you drift now into sleep, may the echoes of those long ago rituals wrap you like linen. May you feel the hush of a wimple's fold, the warmth of beeswax on stone, the softness of rosewater on cheek. For beauty, true and timeless, is not in the mirror, but in the moment, in the movement, in the hush before the bell. Good night, dear soul. Rest softly.